Good morning, boys and girls. I hope you are all well. I hope you enjoyed your guided reading last week. This week, we are going to be focusing on a new book. Just to remind you, you read the same book each guided reading session. It's just different types of quizzes. Okay? So first, let's remind ourselves of some reading strategies. Our first reading strategy we like to use is our eagle eye. That is when we look at a word, we take that first letter of the word and we look at pictures in the book to help us. Our second reading strategy is our stretchy snake. That is when we look at letters in the word, we stretch the sounds out and we go back and say the sounds together. For example, ship, ship, ship. Let's have a go at a reading strategy of our own. So I'll start by saying the word, then you'll have a go, and then we'll have a go all together at the end. Ready? Disgusting. Disgusting. You have a go for me? Lovely job, well done. Let's try it one more time all together. Disgusting. Disgusting. Lovely job, well done. Now the book we are going to look at today, boys and girls, is called Disgusting Dennis. Let's go and have a read. Now boys and girls, this is what our book looks like on Oxford Owl. Don't forget, you can access this at home. Let's have a read. Chapter 1. Oh, Denzil, cried his mother when he flipped chicken curry splat over her best dress. Denzil, you are disgusting, said his father when he squirted tomato ketchup whoosh over the table. They both smiled at him admiringly. Denzil felt proud. He knew he was disgusting. People often told him so. Denzil, you are the most disgusting little monster in Monster City, they said. Every morning he stared happily at himself in the mirror. His hair was spiky, his nose ran, and his mouth dribbled. No wonder his mother and father adored him. No wonder his teacher, Miss Peabody, gave him lots of stars. He was everyone's favourite little monster, until the day where it all began to go badly wrong. It started like any other day with a really mucky, yucky breakfast. Denzil managed to get it all over everything. Good shot, said Dad, taking a piece of tomato from his left eye. Another winner, said Mum. She picked up the piece of toast he had dropped jam side down on the floor. Denzil smiled proudly. Suddenly, Mum turned pale. Donovan, she said. Donovan was the name of Denzil's dad. Donovan, can you fetch my suitcase quickly, please? Denzil didn't ask why his mother wanted her suitcase in the middle of breakfast. He was too busy slurping up his milk. Slurp, slurp, guzzle, burp. Did you hear that, Mum? He boasted. But his mother didn't tell him how clever he was, like she usually did. She just said, Go to school, Denzil. She pushed him out the house without even kissing him goodbye. Puzzled, he made his way to school. There, to his relief, things got better again. The first lesson was a mucky joke. He told a joke about a monster who sat on a plate of mouldy cheese. The other little monsters fell about laughing. Oh, Denzil, said Miss Peabody, that was the most disgusting joke I've ever heard. She gave him 4 red stars, the highest mark you can get. The rest of the day wasn't bad either. In the art lesson, they had to do a self-portrait. That means you have to paint yourself, explained Mr. Bogies, the art teacher. So Denzil painted himself all over in red and yellow stripes. In the music lesson, he blew his nose so loudly that everyone thought that there was an earthquake. Yes, it was a very good day, until he went home and Dad told him he had a new baby sister. Chapter 2. Her name was Devora. Dad took Denzil to see her at the hospital. She lay in a cot beside Mum's bed. "Come and look at her," said Mum. "Little Devora, isn't she sweet? The baby had a bald head, a scarlet face, a blobby nose, and screwed-up eyes." Yes, thought Denzil, she was rather sweet, but he wasn't going to say so. Mum and Dad were gazing at her and making silly goo-goo noises. "Who's Daddy's pride and joy, then?" cooed Dad. Pride and joy? Denzil was shocked and hurt. That's what Dad had always called him. Yet the baby had done nothing to deserve such praise. Nothing at all. It just lay there, like a baby. Suddenly she yawned, a yawn so enormous that Denzil stepped back hastily. The baby's mouth was like a deep red cavern. He had never seen a mouth so huge. It seemed about twice the size of the rest of her body, yet when she shut it again it looked quite normal. "Give her to me," said Mum. "I want to hold her." Gently Dad lifted the baby out of the cot. He placed her in Mum's arm. The baby opened her eyes and smiled. She sipped up a whole lot of white stuff. "What a clever girl!" cried Dad. "I reckon she's going to be even more disgusting than Denzil." A cold, clammy fear took hold of Denzil. He stared at his baby sister. Devora dribbled and coughed, then she yawned again, showing her toothless gum in an awesome display of disgustingness. Was she really going to be worse than him? "Little Devora," said Mum tenderly. Chapter 3. From the moment Devora came home from the hospital, Denzil's life changed. The baby was all that anybody wanted to look at. Isn't she amazing?" they cried. "Isn't she gorgeous?" Nobody took any notice of Denzil at all, and Devora put on a real show for them. She was disgusting at the top end, forever dribbling and blowing raspberries, and she was even more disgusting at the bottom end. Well, it's probably better not to say what happened at the bottom end. Even Denzil had to admit that it was far more disgusting than anything he ever could do. "Denzil, would you like to hold your baby sister?" offered Mum. "No, thanks," he said. "Go on, take her," said Mum. "She won't hurt you." She put the baby into his arms. Denzil stared down at Devora. Devora stared up at Denzil. Then she opened her mouth and screamed. Now when Devora screamed it was worse than when she yawned. She made the most terrible noise, and her mouth was so huge that you could see right down to her stomach. At least that's how it seemed to Denzil. And he was scared. He was so scared that he wanted to run away. Yet he couldn't. He just sat there, staring into the large hole that was Devora's mouth. Mum laughed. "Oh dear, I accept she's got a dirty nappy. You can help me change her." Denzil was stunned into silence. When it came to disgustingness, Devora beat him every time. How would he ever make people notice him again? Chapter 4. Denzil thought and thought. He had to think of something brilliant, something that would make Mum and Dad take notice of him again. At last he had an idea. He went into the garden and collected the biggest, fattest, ooziest slugs that ever lurked under a stone. Not snails, they weren't disgusting enough. He took them into the living room and tipped them on the carpet. "Look what I've got," he said proudly. No one bothered to look. They were too busy gazing at Devora. She was lying on a blanket, kicking her legs and gurgling wetly. "Look what I've got," said Denzil in a louder voice. "Slugs! Masses of them! Lovely, oozy, snoozy, woozy slugs." Mum glanced at them briefly. "Very nice," she said, and went back to admiring Devora. "Look, Dad," said Denzil. "They're leaving a slimy trail all over the carpet." Said Dad, and went back to admiring Devora. Denzil sighed sadly. Then Devora saw a slug slithering across the carpet towards her. A look of wonder and delight came over her face. She waited until the slug came closer, Then, quick as a flash, her fat little hand shot out. She grabbed it. "Oh, look," said Mum, "she likes them." "Go and find her some more, Denzil." Sadly, Denzil went outside. His plan failed. Once again, Devourer had beaten him. What next? At the bottom of the garden there was a pond. It was a truly mucky pond, full of weed and stinking slime. Denzil drew a deep breath and wadded in with all his clothes on. Then he wadded out again. He stood on the bank, dripping wet and covered in smelly green slime. Disgusting! Proudly he went indoors. "Look at me! I fell in the water," he said. This wasn't true, but he didn't want to admit that he had walked into the pond on purpose. Dad sniffed the air. "What's that lovely pong?" Denzil puffed out his chest. "It's me," he boasted. "No, it's Devourer," said Mum. "Her nappy needs changing again." Denzil's shoulders sagged with disappointment. At that moment Devourer saw him. She smiled and held out both her arms. "Oh, the little love," Mum said. "She wants you to pick her up, Denzil." "I don't think it's Denzil she wants," says Dad. "It's that fish poking out of his pocket." Denzil looked down. Sure enough, there was a large, slivery fish sticking out of his pocket. It must have got there whilst he was wading through the pond. He pulled it out and stared at it. Devourer chuckled with delight. She got up from the floor and staggered towards him. "Her first steps!" cried Mum. "Give her the fish, Denzil," said Dad. "She deserves a reward." But Denzil didn't have time to give her the fish. She had already snapped it out his hand. Next moment she opened her huge mouth. She dropped the slimy, slippery fish inside. Then she snapped her mouth shut and swallowed hard. Gulp, 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 burp. Denzil couldn't speak. He had never felt so disgusted in his life. "Her first real food!" cried Dad. "She's growing up fast. She'll be talking next." Denzil's heart sank to the bottom of his squelchy boots. Every time he tried to be disgusting, Devourer managed to be even more disgusting. It was hopeless. Nothing he could do would ever make this family admire him again. Sadly, he turned around and walked out the front door. Nobody even saw him go.